Vasudeva, and of the Pandavas I am Arjuna. Of the sages I am Vyasa, and among great thinkers I am Ushana. Dando Dhammayatam asmi, Nitir asmi jigishatam, Monam chaivasmi guyanam, Yanam Yanavatamaham. Among punishments, I am the rod of chastisement, and of those who seek victory, I am morality. Of secret things, I am silence, and of the wise, I am wisdom. Yakchapi sarvabhutanam bijam tad aham arjuna natadasti vinayatsyan maya bhutam characharam. Furthermore, O Arjuna, I am the generating seed of all existences. There is no being moving or unmoving that can exist without me. Nantosti mamadhyanam vibhutinam parantapa esha tu deshata prokto vibhuter vistaro maya. O mighty conqueror of enemies, there is no end to my divine manifestations. What I have spoken to you is but a mere indication of my infinite opulences. Yad yad vibhutimat sattvam Srimad urjitam eva va tat tad eva vagachatvam mama tejom shasambhavam. Know that all beautiful, glorious, and mighty creations spring from but a spark of my splendor. Atava bhutanaitena kim yatena tavarjuna Vishtabhyaham idam Krishnam ekam shena stito jagat. But what need is there, Arjuna, for all this detailed knowledge? With a single fragment of myself, I pervade and support this entire universe. Chapter 11, the Universal Form. Arjuna Uvacha Mad Anugrahaya Paramam Guyam Adhyatma Samjitam Yat Tvayoktam Vachastena Vahoyam Vigato Mama. Arjuna said, I have heard your instruction on confidential spiritual matters, which you have so kindly delivered unto me, and my illusion is now dispelled. Bhavap yayo hibhutanam shruto vishtarasho maya tvata kamala padraksha mahatmyam abhichavyayam. O lotus-eyed one, I have heard from you in detail about the appearance and disappearance of every living entity, as realized through your inexhaustible glories. Back to text 34. I am all-devouring death, and I am the generator of all things yet to be. Among women, I am fame, fortune, speech, memory, intelligence, faithfulness, and patience. Purport. As soon as a man is born, he dies at every moment. Thus, death is devouring every living entity at every moment. But the last stroke is called death itself. That death is Krishna. All species of life undergo 6 basic changes. They are born, they grow, they remain for some time, they reproduce, they dwindle, and finally vanish. Of these changes, the first is deliverance from the womb, and that is Krishna. The first generation is the beginning of all future activities. The 6 opulences listed are considered to be feminine. If a woman possesses all of them or some of them, she becomes glorious. Sanskrit is a perfect language and is therefore very glorious. After studying, if one can remember the subject matter, he is gifted with good memory or smriti. One need not read many books on different subject matters. The ability to remember a few and quote them when necessary is also another opulence. Laura, should you like to speak on this?
Yes, one begins dying from, you could say he begins living when he comes out of the womb. That's the beginning of his life. Or you could say it's the beginning of his death. Funny. how sober you are. Sober thinker would say, yes, it's going to die. So he's not going to live forever, this body. But no one likes to hear that a child is born and say, well, he's dying now. He started his death. Got 50 years left. Or the death is completely completed. We don't like to hear that. But actually, the science of what death is and what the body is and the soul is actually, it's something that can bring about the greatest happiness, because one realizes he's not the body and that he's not affected by the time. Time destroys everything. Mrityu sarvarascha in the material world, but it doesn't destroy the living entity, the soul. Soul is eternal. So that's why I'm all devouring death. But I'm also the generator. In other words, he's the seed. Bijoham. He's the seed of all existence. Everything has a seed. Anything that grows, seed, you may call it something else, but it's something that begins very small and then it grows. The whole design of the body or a tree, the body of the tree, the body of the human, body of the elephant, is contained in that little seed. What kind of technology that is that can program a whole seed that reproduces practically unlimitedly. Can just go on reproducing, and those seeds are produced and they reproduce. And then this is the earth is able to sustain and keep supporting, giving the nutrition ingredients required to the living beings. What a system this is. Nobody but God. It would take someone that would have an intelligence like God to figure it out. Figure out such a system that keeps going like this. The water depends on the sun, the heat depends on the air depends. This way they're all interdependent and they go on for thousands or millions and trillions of years. Brahma's lifetime is the lifespan of the Brahmanda, this universe. It's 311 trillion years. So it goes through some changes and things. So that's an amazing system that is created by the Lord. And only God can do that, nobody else. So in other words, if someone looks at this, reads this text 34, I'm all devouring death. Who can say they're all devouring death? That would be ludicrous for anyone to say. But God can say, yes, I'm all devouring death. And that's a good thing in one sense, because the living entities, they get new bodies, they get rejuvenated. And then he also gives them eternal life. He's the source of everything. So this is, as we were hearing yesterday, a nice glorification yesterday about the 10th chapter, how it's so full, presents Krishna and presents the Lord in his various aspects. He's all death. He's the eternal life. He's the source. He's the maintainer. He's the creator. He's the destroyer. Yeah, this is only God could be speaking. So if you accept that the person who's speaking this is God, then that's an amazing thing, that a person has so much power.
Thank you, Maharish. Only God could say all of these things. And it can be very obvious if somebody hears this that, okay, this must be the Supreme Personality of Godhead that's speaking these. I heard this example that the Earth is being sustained in the air, in space, and it's moving at however many miles per hour, something like 25,000 or some large number. It's moving very fast in space, rotating and whatever other movements it does. And just when we're driving, it takes some intelligence and coordination just to one to make a car that drives nicely, but then also to drive it in a way that everyone is comfortable and not being jostled around. But still, this planet, this huge planet, which is moving at thousands of miles per hour in space, it's so intelligently um, manipulated that even though we're riding on this thing that's moving so quickly through space, we don't even notice. We think, okay, I'm just sitting down here still. So then how could someone say there's no intelligence behind this universe? We see it takes so much intelligence just to move the automobile smoothly through the road, but we're sitting on this planet which is moving thousands of miles per hour, and we think I'm just sitting still. So how can it be created without any intelligence? This is the idea of this is the demoniac idea that everything is happening without any intelligence or without any person behind it. It's all just happening from chance. Or it's all just, they say, just like how a man and a woman meet and through the inclination of lust produce a child, like that. Everything is just happening from lust only and by some random chance. This is the demoniac idea. But we see it's not random chance. Everything is not just chaotically happening, but there's so much intelligence is needed. The sun is rising at the exact time every day, at the perfect distance. And it's such a hot thing, but even though it's so far away, still here on the earth, however many miles away, again, thousands and thousands of miles, we think, okay, the heat is scorching. It's too much sometimes. But there's all of this it's a perfect arrangement. The sun is at the right distance to grow plants, to have different seasons. It's rising at the right time. All of the different planets in the universe are in the exact positions that they need to be for the different living entities to be on those planets. So how can we say there's no intelligence behind such a creation? Like Maharaj said with the seeds are made so that in something this small, it can develop into a banyan tree, which is millions of miles big, which produces millions of more seeds and millions of more banyan trees. Each species knows to mate with the exact opposite gender of that just that one species and reproduce many living entities. No one's made a self-replicating iPhone or microphone or any of these things. So how can we say there's no intelligence behind uh, the whole creation? It's a nonsensical idea. There's no sense that goes into such an idea, but this is the demoniac idea that there's no intelligence behind everything. Um, and this argument was given by Vasudeva to his demoniac brother-in-law Kamsa on the chariot when Kamsa heard from the sky that the eighth child of your sister will kill you, and immediately he was ready to cut off her head. And Vasudeva, because Kamsa was a demon, so he has this idea that if something is going to get in the way of my senses, my sense gratification, then I'm willing to do anything to stop that from happening. But Vasudeva was a devotee, so he began very soberly to reason with Kamsa that why should you actually be so afraid of death? From the moment you took your birth, your death was already set. From the very moment you were born, you've been dying every day. So why should you be so afraid of death? In any ways, death is simply a change of the body. Just like when somebody takes off old clothes and puts on new ones, that's all death is for the soul. It's taking off the old body and putting on a new body. So why should you be so afraid? And the devotee, they have the desire to fulfill Krishna's desires. But the demons, like Kamsa, they only want to fulfill their own desire. So in the whole universe, there's two classes of living entities. There's the demons and the demigods or the devotees. And the demon wants to, I want to do what I want to do. I want to fulfill my desire. And Krishna is still, he's the one who supplies everything that's needed to fulfill one's desires, either way. So if one wants to go with their own plan and fulfill their demoniac desires, still Krishna gives them full facility and all the ingredients needed to carry out those desires. And then if one just makes the choice that actually, I just want to fulfill Krishna's desires, then he gives all ingredients and facility needed to do that. Just like Hiranyakashipu, he was a big demon, and Krishna gave him all facility to be a big demon, to fulfill his own desires and get his own sense gratification. And Prahlad Maharaj was a devotee, and Krishna gave him all protection and all facility to always engage in the Lord's service. So this is the difference between material and spiritual, is that material is I want to fulfill my desires and keep my material desires, and spiritual is I only want to fulfill Krishna's desires. And that's prema, that I want to satisfy the senses of Bhagavan, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then I want to fulfill, or I want to satisfy the senses of this temporary body, that's kama, or lust. So in Vrindavan, or in the spiritual world, they only want to see that Krishna is satisfied, that I want to see that Krishna is happy. I want to fulfill his desires. That's prema. That's love. And the living entities always have the choice of which one they want to go with. So the decision is always there. If we want to fulfill Krishna's desires, then we become purified and we get all facility to come back to Krishna and serve him. And I was hearing Srila Prabhupada in Hawaii saying that's the difference between here, there's this building, and then there's another building next door full of karmis. And the difference between the temple and the building next door is that the people in the building next door, they want to fulfill their own desire. And the difference with this building is that everyone in it wants to fulfill Krishna's desires. Otherwise, externally, it's the same thing, same stone, same brick, same wood. But the difference is that the people in this building want to see that Krishna is satisfied. And therefore, this building is called the temple, and the other one is called building. So, if we want to satisfy Krishna's senses, then he gives us all facility. And he says, as they surrender unto me with love, I reveal the path by which they can come back to me. So he actually helps us. The more the devotee tries to surrender to Krishna, the more I love, there's one sentence in here where Srila Prabhupada is saying that Krishna wants to see the devotee's painstaking effort to serve him and satisfy him. And so the more that the devotee wants to serve Krishna, the more Krishna facilitates that living entity, serving him and coming back to him, coming back to their natural position. Otherwise, one stays in this material world if they want to fulfill their own desires. And there's 8,400,000 different species of bodies that they can do that with. So as long as one has some of their own desire to satisfy their senses, then they just get another body in this material world where they can try to satisfy those senses again. They can fulfill that desire. But if one wants to satisfy Krishna's senses, then this material body is all right, but the spiritual body is better. If they want to satisfy Krishna's senses, then they get a spiritual body. They go back to their original spiritual body with Krishna in the spiritual world, where they can serve him eternally. No more birth, no more death, no more disease, no more old age. And as Maharaj was saying, the soul, it's eternal, ever existing, undying, and primeval. It's not slain when the body is slain. It's never born and it never dies. So it's only because of this wanting to fulfill my selfish desire, wanting to satisfy the senses of this body, that we stay in this illusory condition where we have to go through birth, death, disease, and old age, because those things are actually foreign to the soul. For the soul, there's no birth and there's no death. So death is an unnatural circumstance that the soul doesn't have to go through, because for the soul, it's eternal. So if you're living, that means you'll always live. And if someone is still worried about, well, what about the death of the body? Well, the body is just made of dead matter. It's made of matter, which was never living to begin with. So certainly for something that's not living, there's no death. So for the living entity, death does not actually exist. And if the living entity engages in its natural constitutional position of serving Krishna and fulfilling his desires, then there's no more death, no more birth, no more disease, no more old age, because those things only pertain to this body. And the body is just a symptom of the selfish desire to try to serve my senses, try to fulfill my desire. Of hymns, I am the Brihat Sama sung to the Lord Indra, and of poetry, I am the Gayatri verse sung daily by Brahmanas. Of months, I am November and December, and of seasons, I am flower-bearing spring. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Yes, Radha Damodar, Prabhu.
I'm just wondering what exactly happens. Like we know what happens at the time of death. Like the soul passes on, leaves the body behind, takes a new body. But what can we expect to happen during the time of death? What will that experience be like?
Well, in a lot of Prabhupada's purports, we see some, I mean, if you're ever around somebody who's dying, then that's probably an easy way to learn what to expect just by experience. But also in his purports, if we haven't seen that, he does describe it often that it's hard to even chant Hare Krishna because your throat is choked up. There's a lot of mucus problem happening. Everything's imbalanced in the body. It's extremely distressful for the living entity, the time of death, because it's such a, everything's shutting down. It's a foreign experience. You don't know what to do. You know, I'm used to this thing operating somewhat functionally, but then everything starts shutting down. There's mucus in the throat where the air is supposed to be. So I've read it described as extremely distressful for the living entity. So it's hard to focus the mind, hard to even speak. But if one engages their whole life in trying to spread Krishna consciousness and preaching for Krishna, then Lord Chaitanya personally comes and takes them back to Godhead. Even if they can't say Hare Krishna or they can't focus their mind, and all these, it's a crazy situation. But if one is fully surrendered, they've given their whole life to pleasing Krishna by preaching his message, by bringing living entities back to him. That's real compassion. Then Lord Chaitanya personally comes to take that devotee back home, back to Godhead. And also, we will come up on it soon in the Bhagavatam that if one gives their whole life to being in the army of Lord Brahma, if they give their whole life in this Brahma Gaudiya Sampradaya to doing what the Brahma Gaudiya Sampradaya is for, helping the conditioned living entities come back to their unconditioned state of love of God, then Krishna personally shakes hands with with that living entity. So we'll read that soon as we see he shakes hands with Lord Brahma. So yeah, the end of life is always distressful, but for one that actually just wants to satisfy Krishna, Krishna says that his devotee will never perish. And he says, you declare it, Arjuna. So now it's an even stronger statement than if Krishna said it himself, because now his devotee is saying it. So he protects it. Krishna protects his devotees. Is there any other questions? Okay. Um, well, anybody? Yeah, Radha Damodar Prabhu.
I remember reading a while ago in like the Rig Veda or something that it says
Where were you reading the Rig Veda?
so, supposedly the Rig Veda online. But I was just going like looking at some of the verses, and it's interesting that it glorifies. Of course, I'm not a Sanskrit scholar, so I don't know, but it glorifies it glorifies Indra and all these other demigods as being supreme simultaneously.
Mm.
It glorifies Indra as the supreme, like, Godhead, and then it says Rudra is the supreme Godhead.
Mm.
So I was wondering, how are we to understand that? I guess it's kind of weird because I don't have the actual translation, but
No, I know what you're talking about, because
yeah,
that comes up in the Bhagavatam also, and sometimes it's confusing. I wanted to just read, because I just read about that exactly in the Bhagavatam. But one thing, I'll just recite what I remembered, and then I'll try to find it. Vishnu arrived at the sacrifice of Daksha, and he was saying that Lord Shiva, Brahma, and I, impersonally, there's no difference between us. So I also thought was wondering what that meant. And Prabhupada then describes in the purport how there were a few different points that he made to explain it. One point, which is kind of the easiest, is that, okay, everything is Krishna's energy. Everything is coming from him. So in one sense, yeah, they are non-different than him because they're his energy. They're coming from him. And then there was another point about how there's different representatives for God in the material world. Just like Shiva, he's the representative of God in the material world. And Durga, she's the representative of the external energy of the Lord and the marginal energy of the Lord. So like that, they're representatives. I think that's all I can remember. So now I'll just read it. Oh, sorry. I got confused. I was looking at Dhruva Maharaj. I was getting upset. That wasn't what I was looking for. Um, let's see. This is just before we hear about Dhruva Maharaj getting upset. It's at the end of the chapter, chapter 5 of the 4th canto, frustration of the sacrifice of Daksha. And it's right around the time that Lord Vishnu appears, and the demigods and different personalities, they offer some prayers and praises to Lord Vishnu, and then Lord Vishnu begins to speak. Let's see. Hare Krishna, Hare. Here it is. Lord Vishnu replied, Brahma, Lord Shiva, and I are the supreme cause of the material manifestation. I am the super soul, the self-sufficient witness, but impersonally, there is no difference between Brahma, Lord Shiva, and me. And then also just before that, I think there was a similar statement. No, okay. So here's the purport. Lord Brahma was born out of the transcendental body of Lord Vishnu, and Lord Shiva was born out of the body of Brahma. Lord Vishnu is therefore the supreme cause. In the Vedas also it is stated that in the beginning there was only Vishnu, Narayana. There was no Brahma or Shiva. Similarly, Shankaracharya confirmed this, Narayana Paraha. Narayana or Lord Vishnu is the origin, and Brahma and Shiva are manifested after creation. Lord Vishnu is also Atmeshvara, the super soul in everyone. Under his direction, everything is prompted from within. For example, in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated, Tene Brahma Hrida. He first educated Brahma from within. In Bhagavad Gita 10.2, Lord Krishna states, Aham Adir Hi Devanam. Lord Vishnu or Krishna is the origin of all demigods, including Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. In another place in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna states, Aham Sarvasya Prabhava. Everything is generated from me. This includes all the demigods. Similarly, Vedanta Sutra Janmadhyasya Yataha and in the Upanishads is the statement Yato va imani bhutani jayante. Everything is generated from Lord Vishnu, everything is maintained by him, and everything is annihilated by his energy. Therefore, by their actions and reactions, the energies which come from him create the cosmic manifestations and also dissolve the whole creation. Thus, the Lord is the cause and also the effect. Whatever effect we see is the interaction of his energy, and because the energy is generated from him, he is both cause and effect. Simultaneously, everything is different and the same. It is said that everything is Brahman, sarvam kalvidam Brahma. In the highest vision, nothing is beyond Brahman, and therefore, Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva are certainly non-different from him. Okay, that was the first example that I had given, that because it's all his energy, they're non-different from him. Okay, I'll just read the next text too because it's on the same topic. The Lord continued, My dear Daksha Dvija, I am the original personality of Godhead, but in order to create, maintain, and annihilate this cosmic manifestation, I act through my material energy, and according to the different grades of activity, my representations are differently named. Purport. As explained in Bhagavad Gita, Jiva Bhutam Mahabaho, the whole world is energy released from the Supreme Source, the personality of Godhead, who is further stated in Bhagavad who it is further stated in Bhagavad Gita, acts in superior energies and inferior energies. Here, I'll see if I can just get to just specifically the point about the demigods. Okay. The entities have different bodies, but originally in the beginning of creation, Lord Vishnu is alone. For the purpose of creation, Brahma is manifested, and after annihilation, and for annihilation, there is Lord Shiva. As far as the spiritual entrance into the material world is concerned, all beings are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, but under the covering of different material qualities, they have different names. Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva are qualitative incarnations of Vishnu as guna avatars, and Vishnu with them accepts control of the quality of goodness. Therefore, he is also a qualitative incarnation like Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. So then there's the other reason that he has his different representations also. So, but then he also says after that that one who is not in proper knowledge thinks that demigods like, this is Lord Vishnu speaking. One who is not in proper knowledge thinks that demigods like Brahma and Shiva are independent, or he even thinks that the living entities are independent. So they're incarnations of the material nature's modes of passion and ignorance, but they represent those different functions of the Lord. So yeah, sometimes they're glorified as the supreme, but they're the representative of the supreme for different aspects. So like Lord Shiva, he's the representative of the supreme for the purpose of destruction, Brahma for the purpose of creation, the shark for the category of fish is the representative of the supreme, all those different things we read. Of the demigods, I am Indra. Of wielders of weapons, I am Rama, who that is Krishna. Of purifiers, I am the wind. So he's the best of all categories. So these different things, someone will see them and say, okay, this is the supreme. Out of all the purifiers, the wind, this is the supreme. And that wind is Krishna because it's the supreme. And everything is coming from him. And the best thing in that category of purifiers, that best thing, that's the representative of Krishna because he's the best. And then as we see in the grand finale of this whole chapter, after stating all these different opulences, of fishes, I'm the shark, of birds, I'm Garuda, of Pandavas, I'm Arjuna. He's the best of all of these things. And then we get to the grand finale that what I have spoken to you there is no end to my divine manifestations. What I have spoken to you is but a mere indication of my infinite opulences. Know that all beautiful, glorious, and mighty creations spring from but a spark of my splendor. But what need is there, Arjuna, for all this detailed knowledge? With the single fragment of myself, I pervade and support this entire universe. So not only is he the best, but everything is resting on him. And it doesn't take very much for him to maintain everything. Whereas for us to maintain one thing, it's such a big deal. So Prabhupada gives many examples. For us to maintain anything in this world, it's a huge deal. But for Krishna, he maintains 16,108 wives, and it's simple. And each one of them has their own Krishna in their own palace, and they get to see that, okay, my husband's there. All of them get that. But for someone I was just hearing this in a lecture just before I came to the class. For someone to just maintain one, if someone is considering marrying, they have to think about it 100 times. You're saying that, will I be able to maintain a wife? But for Krishna, he can maintain 16,108 and it's no problem. And Prabhupada also was saying that if we hear that someone maintains 16 wives, it's, wow, how is that even possible? So this is Krishna. His opulences are limitless. And then Prabhupada even gave the example that if one has many wives, if one thinks they can maintain 16 wives, then they might have a fear of becoming impotent. He briefly mentioned. He said, but Krishna, he had 16,108 wives, And in each of them, he begot 10 children. And that made the whole Yadu dynasty. So 16,108 times 10, that's Krishna's family. So it's inconceivable. So therefore, it is complete rascaldom when one wants to claim that they are God. They can't even maintain an iPhone or some 6x2 space to sleep on. But Krishna, he can maintain all the universes so perfectly. The planets are floating in such a way that we don't even feel them move. All of the living entities are complete whole persons. And so that's the opulence of the absolute. Are there any more questions? Yeah.
There's a cool section of the first canto, second chapter. And it's really interesting how it unfolds it. But basically, Sutta Goswami is describing that the really wise persons, they reject the ghastly forms, the demigods, because the demigods can't give any liberation. And Prabhupada in the purport makes a comment that it's also the beautiful ones too. The beautiful, the attractive, or the ghastly forms of the demigods are rejected by the Brahmanas. So Brahmana means essentially one who is in the mode of goodness. He can see things as they are. And actually, it's not very easy to understand the Vedas. That's actually discussed many times. And one has to understand it in parampara. So without proper understanding, we may read something in the scripture, and it may, to the scholar, it may say this on paper, but without hearing that in that point, and it's very, there's a lot of points in there. Without hearing that point in parampara, we can easily misunderstand. And one misunderstanding can bring about disaster. And the commentaries, like a Sanskrit scholar can hide, behind the beautiful Sanskrit literatures. Just like we heard tonight, it's the Sanskrit was Prabhupada glorified the Sanskrit language in one of these purports that we read. But as soon as he gives his commentary on it, then you can easily see that actually he doesn't know anything about it. But back to the first canto, second chapter, there's one verse where in the third chapter where Shukadev Goswami or Sutta Goswami is describing the incarnations of the Lord, and he mentions the 19th and the 20th, which are Krishna and Balaram. And in that verse, he uses the word Bhagavan. In all the other verses, all of those are also incarnations of Krishna, they're avatars. But in that verse, he uses this specific phrase to describe Lord Krishna and Balaram. And in the purport, Prabhupada describes that the acharyas say that this use of this word indicates that these are not in the same category as the other ones who come from out of the Purusha avatar, out of Kshirodakshaya Vishnu into the material universes, that they are the source of all the incarnations, or their avatari like that. Of course, Balaram is the first expansion. So one can, I'm just making an example that without hearing that information in parampara, then easily we could think that Sutta Goswami himself is putting Vrahadev on the same level as Krishna. One is number, blank, and one is number blank of the incarnations. But when we hear that one word and then we hear what the Charyas have to say about that one phrase, then it elucidates that there's a difference. So anyway, the value of the parampara, hearing in parampara.
Well, Vrahadev is Krishna also. Yeah, but he is Krishna. All of his, like the Das Avatar Stotram, Nrsimha, Rama, Krishna, Vrahadev. They are Krishna, but in one of his many forms. But I'm just adding on to it. Not that you don't have this misunderstanding, but that they are Vishnu Tattva, so they're the same supreme personality of Godhead. There was a point that you had mentioned for it. Anyway, I forgot. But okay. There was one point that you had mentioned just before that. Anyway, whatever. Bhagavad Gita as it is, ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.